Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. Today we have Deepinder Dhingra on the show with us, or DD as everybody calls him. DD is currently the founder and CEO of RevSure. At RevSure, they're building the future of attribution for B2B SaaS and tech companies. Right. Prior to this, DD was the founder of Samya AI, which was acquired by Fractal. He's also been the chief product officer at Noodle.ai, and he was the head of products and strategy at MuSigma, where he spent 8 years. Such a pleasure to have you on the show, dude.
Thanks, Sunil. Thanks for having me. Great to be here and great to be talking with you in this forum.
Nice, awesome. Such a great journey, really, you have had, and I know like we have all the conversations we have had. I always had this question in mind, like if you had to describe like your journey in SaaS particularly into a tweet, right? So what would that look like?
Yeah, I would say it would be fascination with the enterprise software SaaS B2B GTM motion
Mm-hmm.
and the urge to figure out how to use data, AI, and machine learning to improve some of the key inefficiencies in that GTM motion.
Nice, interesting. And I think the topic for our discussion today is also on the similar lines, right? And also on the lines of what you're building at RevSure, right? How can AI particularly come in and play a pivotal role into solving attribution for modern GTM teams, right? Attribution has always been the talk of the town between the GTM teams, whether you are in sales, marketing, or even customer success. Trying upsells and cross sells, and it's always been a fight, right? But before we get into the topic, would love to know more about you and how's your journey been in the SaaS ecosystem, and what landed you to create RevSure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my journey, I spent about 20 years in enterprise software analytics, big data, machine learning. Started my career as a software consultant, development engineer back in 2000. I started with a company called I2 Technologies, which was in the supply chain planning software space. And at that time, we were using the latest math of that era. So, there was this whole movement around using more and more math for supply chain planning, whether that was operations research models, whether those econometric models, and some simple regression-based models, right? And so there, as a software engineer and a consultant, I would kind of work with enterprise retailers, enterprise CPG companies, helping them optimize inventory, to demand planning, better demand forecasting, how to figure out their merchandise plans, their store assortments, etc. Then I worked for a couple of late-stage startups, a startup called Demantra, a trade promotions optimization software company, and then a visual analytics platform called Spotfire. So the early stages of my career, at least the first 10 years of my career, was all about the business of enterprise software, right? I did multiple roles, whether that was development, consulting, engineering, professional services, implementation, pre-sales, technical account management, and also in the context of software that was driven by data and how can we use data to solve and optimize for business problems, whether those were problems supply chain planning or trade promotions optimization, consumer packaged goods. And then I did a lot also in the financial services industry around portfolio attribution analytics and risk analytics. And then, the first 10 years of my career, that was what I was doing. I was in the US. Then I relocated to India to be part of MuSigma, the big data analytics unicorn, which at that time was a fledgling analytics startup. And the whole mandate around MuSigma was how can we build a man-machine ecosystem? At that time, analytics services was taking off, but we realized that you needed the right combination of people, processes, and platforms. And me coming from an enterprise software background, we thought that we can build a lot of products and assets. And that's what we did at MuSigma. And that was a very successful story. We grew to be a unicorn. But in that MuSigma journey, we also worked with a lot of Fortune 500 clients, and we were solving some of the cutting edge problems of that time. And a lot of the problems was around marketing mix, multi-touch attribution, cross-sell, upsell, etc. And that's where I started getting more and more involved in how do you optimize B2B and B2C GTM motions at that time. We were working with sales teams, marketing teams of companies like Dell, SAP, NetApp, Microsoft, right? They have their own B2B. They are kind of mix of B2B, B2C. Some are also B2B to C, right? So you kind of had a chance to look at various GTM motions and also look at various types of businesses, right? Because they're different GTM motions for the SMB market, the GTM motions for the middle market, the GTM motions for the enterprise market, right? And the common theme was complexity, right? Whether that is whether you're selling a product in the B2B for SMBs or enterprise or for commercial segment, there's, inevitably multi-region, multi-channel marketing, that introduces a lot of complexity because you really don't know how effective all of your efforts are. Are your investments taking, giving you the right ROI? And so for many of these companies, we would do marketing mix models and multi-touch attribution models. And we would do cross-sell models, upsell models, uplift models using data and analytics to help them improve their GTM motions, right? And that's how the idea, as I started kind of doing that more and more, that's the idea of RevSure came about. And obviously, I would also like to say the whole emergence of the India SaaS, led by Zoho and Freshworks and ChargeBee, etc. And that was also gaining steam. And I got really fascinated by, can I bring my skill sets to the modern B2B SaaS GTM motion? And that's how the journey of RevSure.ai got started.
Nice, nice. That's a very, very solid journey. And I think you've been in the trenches of just like a lot of data and analytics particularly. And then, I think it would be very insightful to know from you, like, just to understand like what's the ever evolving landscape of GTM attribution, right? When you figured out like the Freshworks and Zoho and ChargeBee when they started in India, and you saw that, there might be a shift in, Indian SaaS, and there might be like a need to solve for it, like not only in India, but also globally, like a lot of SaaS businesses, finding it difficult to solve these kind of challenges, even the kind of names that you give, like, the big
Yeah.
SaaS of the world. So it's always baffled me like how the concept of attribution has changed over time, and how traditional models like the ones that you mentioned often like, fail to give GTM teams like a very clear picture. Even though like there were models that existed for many, many years, there's still a fight, right? So what has been the biggest shift according to you in how companies approach attribution, particularly in SaaS?
Yeah, I think obviously there's been an evolution. Right? If you went 20 years back, right, the primary GTM motion in the B2B world was outbound, right? Marketing was more about strategic positioning, competitive strategy, analyst relationships, maybe attending a few conferences, right? But 20 years back, marketing was not really seen as a demand generation channel, right? And primarily it was outbound. You would have inside sales teams that were prospecting, and you would have sales teams that would have a Rolodex. That's what, when I was working in the enterprise software business, that's what I saw. Now, because the consumerization of the GTM motion, this whole demand generation motion, you're trying to run a lot of digital campaigns, attracting visitors into your funnel, or trying to nurture them into leads, marketing qualified leads, hand it over to SDR, BDR teams that will kind of contact, work, engage those accounts, right? Or further qualify them. And then you will kind of hand it and bring sales teams together to further qualify and create an opportunity in the CRM. And further, that opportunity would go through its own stages, right? Demo, contract, evaluation, negotiation, different stages, different companies define their pipeline stages differently. And finally, would convert that customer and then hand it over to the customer success team. So the evolution of the B2B motion in SaaS has really followed the complexity that has come into place by having multiple teams, right? Marketing, demand generation teams, SDR, BDR teams, sales teams, customer success teams, trying to work together to drive pipeline and revenue. That's the first thing. And the second thing that's happened is that because there's so many tools that get used, CRM tools and marketing automations tools and digital tools and ABM tools and SDR sales automation outreach tools, buyer intelligence tools, data has always been disparate. So the problem of attribution, which was really about measurement, right? How can I measure the effectiveness of a campaign? It used to happen at multiple levels, right? Or primarily two levels. One is at the campaign level. Can I figure out what was the performance of the campaign? And at an overall level, I'm spending X million dollars on digital, I'm spending $5 million on trade shows, etc. What is the return on that? Those two levels started becoming complex because of all of these multiple teams. And then you had multiple motions, right? You have multi-product. Some are SMB products, some are mid-market products, some are enterprise products. You have multiple regions who have their own buying journeys. And you know that in the B2B motion, the buying journeys are pretty long. You have the marketing life cycle, then you have the sales life cycle, etc. And so the complexity itself drove a lot of pain in being able to do attribution. So what you would do earlier in terms of source-based reporting for campaign performance, or like marketing generated pipeline or sales generated pipeline or SDR BDR generated pipeline, no longer was valid because there were so many influences in driving pipeline and revenue. So let's say you did a digital campaign or you ran a trade show event or a webinar event, right? Those leads were getting influenced not just because of your touches or your particular campaigns, they were getting influenced because of many other channels that were happening as well, right? And so the concept of first touch and last touch, which used to happen earlier, and
Hmm.
which would probably suffice in the era when the primary motion was not that complex, was no longer valid, right? So that's what the evolution of attribution has really been to try to evolve with the complexity and the requirements of the modern B2B GTM motion.
Yes.
And what ends up happening is that most marketing teams try to focus only on the marketing motion.
Right.
But we know that, it takes like two to tango, right? It's a marketing motion, the SDR, BDM motion, and all of these motions coming together. And so the measurement problem became not only about measuring marketing campaigns, but how multiple motions were synergizing together. And so that's really what's been with the evolution of attribution for B2B SaaS, essentially.
Nice. Yeah. And it's true, like you mentioned, like the first touch, last touch, right? Like very easy to get started with, and the base of the models, right? And even like, even if you're just starting out in today's world, I don't think like just following one either of these models would, help you get anywhere, right? Because now, as you mentioned, like there's so much of complexity now in terms of like different motions, different products, different sales motion like PLG and sales led, and different channels on
Yeah.
top of that, right? And so many tools, like, and everybody's throwing data at you, right? So the types of the data in that GTM teams need, right? The complexities of managing this data, and how AI, like, helps teams transform these scattered data sets into actionable insights. That makes me think like how does AI help in this, right? In terms of cleaning this data, unifying this data, and then analyzing these scattered data sets and different sources, and painting like a picture out of it, right? So what have you seen in your experience?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think you got it right that to get attribution robust, you need a very strong data foundation, right? Because if you're not able to capture all of the touch points, all of the influences that are impacting a lead or an account or an opportunity, right? You won't be able to do a good job in attribution. And that's where the data aspect comes in, as well as the AI aspect comes in. So there are two aspects of how we use AI and how we think AI gets used for doing better attribution. The first one is being able to harmonize data across the multiple data sources, because you want to understand, get data from the CRM system, the marketing automation system, from all of these digital tools like LinkedIn, Google, Meta, ABM tools like Six Sense, demand based, sales automation, outreach tools like Outreach, Sales Drop, etc. You're doing direct mail campaigns, right? Let's say Sendoso. And then you also want to understand all website activity, right? There's an anonymous visitor that comes to your website. You want to be able to de-anonymize it and then bring what interactions that are happening to first conversion on the website and beyond. As well as you want to get all data about offline channels, right? Because B2B, it's a mix of online and offline channels. So whether you're doing trade shows, conferences, etc., bringing that data together, itself needs an AI, right? So what we end up doing is we end up creating a knowledge graph or a revenue data graph of all of this data that comes together. You need to harmonize the data, deduplicate the data, create the linkages between leads to accounts to opportunities to campaigns to members to visitors to leads, right? You need to be able to identify, okay, if I'm doing dark social channels, how can I best capture them, whether that's data from podcast sites, from peer review sites, etc., as well as anonymous visitor activity that's happening on a website, which earlier you were not able to identify. So bringing all of this requires its own AI, and we actually use a lot of generative AI and machine learning to be able to harmonize the data, right, and create the linkages. So that itself is a AI intensive activity to bring data together. So what customer data platforms do in, end up essentially having to do in a better way for driving attribution, right? Because without which you really can't have a strong attribution platform.
Nice. And like, what, in your experience, you must have, conversed with a lot of GTM teams, right? And even though they know like there is some kind of tool out there, or there is some kind of platform or system service out there which is going to help them uh you know take, maybe not solve it entirely in one click, like that's the dream, but get few steps closer every time they make some changes and make go into the direction of solving the attribution, right? So
Yeah.
where do you think like GTM teams generally fall short when they're trying to solving these data challenges, especially now with AI? It's been everything's been easy now.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of places. The way we think about it is, first is your mindset, right? What is the question you're trying to answer? Unfortunately, most GTM teams get stuck in using attribution for who gets the credit, right? Hey, I generated an opportunity. Is it marketing that should get the credit, the SDR, BDR team, or the sales team? So they get lost in that quantification of credit, which is very counterproductive, right? You hear a lot of attribution wars just because of that, and then you have some rules, right? Or if there was, something came in from marketing, but did not convert into a meeting, then marketing does not get the credit in the first 6 months, right? So there are all of these random rules that you end up placing just to solve the who gets the credit question. And that is very counterproductive. So our perspective is that the mindset should change from using attribution not for quantifying who gets the credit, but what should we do next, right? Where should we double down on? How should we reallocate spend, right? The second one is thinking full funnel, right? So beyond just measuring the performance of marketing campaigns, how do you think about the performance of your overall marketing spend or GTM spend, where marketing, the SDR, BDR activities, and the sales activities are working together, right? And that's where not only the AI in terms of bringing data together, but AI in terms of learning the interactions and the roles that each marketing effort, each SDR, BDR effort, and sales effort is playing in the overall buyer journey, right? And that's why you use a lot of AI and machine learning that can extract and learn from data what's really working and what's not working. So thinking full funnel is very important, right? The third thing that we see is, what is the analytical approach you take, right? So instead of taking a source of first touch or last touch, even multi-touch attribution nowadays is very rules based, right? You think about a rule like linear or J-shaped or U-shaped curves, etc. But those are very rules and opinion based, right? The future of attribution is really about using data and machine learning. And there are three approaches to attribution. There's multi-touch attribution, there's marketing mix, which is top-down, multi-touch is more bottom-up, and there's incrementality testing. And so marketing teams and GTM teams are looking to use attribution insights should bring a confluence of analytical approaches, right? And finally, the last dimension that we like to think about is, what is the time frame of the decisions you want to make, right? So attribution should not be about waiting till the end of the campaign or the end of the quarter to look back and justify spend. That's not the use of attribution necessarily. Attribution should help you take more real-time decisions. Can I refine my campaigns based on the attribution insights? If I get predictive insights from all the measurement and prediction activities, can I reallocate spend faster and better, right? So going from a reactive approach to a more forward-looking approach is really that how GTM teams should think about using attribution for.
Nice. Thanks. Again, like I think this is like a very good framework, attribution framework to get started, right? It involves like all the key components, the best practices, as you mentioned, for implementing this kind of framework. But then, how would you like now in a post AI world, right? Like the world we are in, right? And it's going to get more AI everywhere, right? So how can you include the same kind of key components, maybe new best practices that you have seen to implement AI-driven attribution, right from, let's say, tool selection to convincing your higher ups to implementing the right processes, having the right governance and set of rules, as you mentioned, right? So, given all of this in place, like what steps should the GTM teams take to build like an AI-powered attribution framework?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing is, we think attribution is not a project or an app, right? It's a transformation initiative. You can start small, but ultimately you need to think about, hey, people, we need to bring the right set of people. It should not just have people from marketing. It should have people from marketing, markups, RevOps, sales coming together, right? Obviously under a champion, which could be the CMO, or it could be a council of the CMO and the CRO, right? So there's it's a whole GTM team initiative, because the insights from attribution will impact every part of the GTM motion. That's the first thing, right? The second thing is, have an audit of your tech stack, right? Understand, okay, for my B2B GTM motion, what are the key characteristics? So we have a PLG motion or an inbound or an outbound led motion? Or what are the questions, what questions are we trying to answer based on that, right? Are you trying to answer channel effectiveness questions? So you need to have a clear view of what you expect from your attribution. Are you trying to get ROI of, hey, I want to understand how much to spend on digital versus events versus other channels, right? Or you're trying to get more campaign level insights, right? Or you're trying to understand how to orchestrate buyer journeys better across sales and marketing. So having a perspective on what questions you want to answer, having a shared understanding of those questions, right? Because different people will want different things from attribution, but putting almost like an attribution manifesto saying these are the questions we want to answer, right? Third thing is creating a shared language where you say that what does attribution mean to each one of us? Could be based on what questions we want to answer, but how are we going to measure, right? What are the metrics we are going to look at? So create a shared understanding on the metrics.
Right.
Then obviously you want a tool set that able to integrate across your GTM tech stack. You want an attribution that can adapt to the specifics of your GTM motion, right? So when you're looking for attribution solutions and attribution approaches, it should not only be able to answer the different attribution questions that you want to get answered, but they should be able to integrate with your GTM tech stack and the specific tools that you have in your GTM tech stack, right? It should be able to adapt to your uniqueness of your GTM motion, right? And then it should have a more database approach rather than a rules-based approach, right? So it should be having AI and machine learning. Now you could ask, what is the kind of AI machine learning techniques, right? Are you using for multi-touch attribution Markov chain models, right? For marketing mix, what kind of models are you using for marketing mix? Does your marketing mix model have the ability to adapt to long sales cycles, the enterprise GTM motion, right? Or are you just using something that is used for B2C because that doesn't adapt to the B2B motion? Do you have incrementality testing? Are you able to measure the effectiveness by causal effectiveness of certain campaigns and certain channels using incrementality testing methods? So there's some specific set of questions that you might want to have from an AI and machine learning perspective. And then finally, attribution insights will only be effective if they can get consumed and if people can understand that, right? So is there a good application and consumption layer that simplifies the adoption of these insights for the field marketer, for the demand creation marketer, for the digital marketer, for the SDR BDR team, for RevOps, so marketing ops? So does the application, and how will you expose what are those prototypical dashboards and applications and insights you need, right, to support different types of decisions? So that's how one would think about it. Yeah.
Nice, nice. I think you mentioned about, specific some KPIs and some metrics, right? Even for these consumable dashboards. By seeing those dashboards, like any person owning any channel or any, KPI, if they're hitting the KPIs, that means it's working and they're able to only know it because of the dashboard, and the dashboard only has the data because whatever framework that you have is getting implemented correctly. So are there any specific KPIs or success metrics that GTM team should monitor continuously to confirm that this AI framework, AI attributed framework is working?
Got it. So there are two metrics. So one is what metrics insights does the attribution give, and then how do you know it's working, right? So there are two aspects of this. So usually if you think about the metrics that people monitor, you want to monitor typical metrics around ROI, right? There's the contribution, pipeline contributions, pipeline ROI, booking ROI, right? You might want to measure at different stages of the funnel metrics like, attributed. If you have an ABM motion, it could be attributed MQL volumes, SQL volumes. So lead build motion, it could be attributed MQL volumes, SQL volumes, SAL volumes, and pipeline volumes, etc. They're trying to measure the effect of campaigns, attributed effect of campaigns, attributed effect of channels, attributed effect of SDR sequences at different stages of the funnel, right? Because you want to not just understand what gives me final pipeline and revenue, but how does it give that, right? What is the role of each activity, channel, and campaign at different stages of the funnel? That's what attribution insight should give you. Now, how do you know whether those attribution insights are working? It is when you act on those attribution insights, right? So for example, attribution could give you an insight like how to refine channels, how to reallocate spend across channels. Now, when you did the reallocation, did that give you a lift 6 months down the line? You need to have a measurement methodology to say that after I acted on the attribution insights, Is that give me a lift in pipeline ROI or booking ROI, whatever metric you choose, right? Second thing, am I driving faster conversions, right? So if your attribution insights tells you that these types of campaigns and these types of activities are better at driving MQL to SQL conversions, you start implementing them and then measure that 6 months, 3 months down the line. And did you get a lift in conversion, right? As an example. And that itself has its own statistical way of measuring the lift, right? Third thing, am I improving the ROI? Am I able to generate pipeline? Let's say you plan, you reallocate spend based on different, from reallocation insights from attribution. 6 months down the line, did you generate a higher pipeline for the same amount of spend, right? If there was a reallocation suggestion, or if there was a suggestion of changing mix, as an example. So that's the metrics. Now, for those metrics, obviously, you don't want to measure at the end of 6 months to say whether my attribution is working or not. You need to have a monitoring framework that in real time can give you leading indicator insights as to whether that is working or not, right? As well as real time insights, as well as forward looking insights. So let's say now I start executing based on attribution insights. Can I put a measurement, a real time measurement framework that gives me leading indicators of whether that is working? Because you don't want to wait till the end of the, the period to see whether you did well or not, right? You want leading indicators as well as forward looking predictive indicators to say whether this is really working or not, right? And that leading indicators depends on being attribution itself tell you what are the leading indicators. So one of the things that we do is we create this network of levers, right, which ultimately correlate to the final pipeline and revenue generation, but it'll tell you what is intermediate that is predictive of getting improved pipeline and revenue. So you want to kind of start measuring those leading indicators. Yeah.
Nice. I think that's a very comprehensive way, to look at it and finally understand, like, hey, are things moving in the right direction or not, right? And I think this has been very great. Like, so before we move on to the last section, which is the lightning round, we'll just cover, like, what are your thoughts on the future of AI in particular to GTM attribution, right? I think we're still scratching the surface with AI. So there's a lot of trends, a lot of innovation. I think many potential challenges that we can expect in the near and long term, depending on how the AI advancements go, right? So, and especially talking about AI in attribution space, right? So, how should SaaS companies, in your experience, like, how should SaaS companies prepare now to stay competitive as AI driven attribution takes table stakes?
Yeah, I think couple of things. First of all, what AI driven attribution lets you do is to connect attribution insights to day-to-day funnel management, right? So from a B2B SaaS company, it's going to give you insights at each stage of the funnel, right? What are the right campaigns and tactics to drive top of the funnel, to drive top of the funnel to middle of the funnel conversion, middle of the funnel to bottom of the funnel conversions, right? So when you're starting to think about attribution, think about how you can use it and connect it to day-to-day funnel management. That's the first thing. The second thing that attribution insights, what the future of what attribution will do is become full funnel and become more and more agentic, right? Which will get plugged into every aspect of your buyer journey. So it's measuring all of the activities you're doing at each stage of the buyer journey and giving you real-time feedback on that, as well as suggesting the next best action, right? At some point, we might be able to do autonomous next best action as well, right? So it kind of, was able to execute and orchestrate the next best action. But what you'll see is that AI-based attribution will start becoming plugged into different stages of your funnel and the buyer journey. So it can start giving you recommendations and autonomous or semi-autonomous action and actionability based on those recommendations. That's the first thing. And so the instrumentation around that becomes important, right? Because if you are going to go on this journey, your marketing ops instrumentation and your tech instrumentation, right, becomes important for to set yourself up, right, for that, right? And obviously the data foundation associated with it, right? But if you're able to use the AI-based attribution in an agentic way across the funnel, which is orchestrating certain action based on measurement and feedback loops, right? That's really maximizes the potential of the GTM funnel for any customer, for any company.
Nice. And I think this one thing always comes to my mind when, when we're kind of implementing AI for different streams, right? Whether it's in AI for just creating content or analyzing your SEO, or as big as like, doing your attribution modeling and becoming like autonomous, like based on what the insights, what output is, and taking like autonomously and trying to solve it. Like, it can go sideways also sometimes, you never know.
Yeah.
So what is the, like, is there a risk of over reliance on AI? And if so, like, how can teams find the right balance between, like, you're not over indexing on AI, but you're also looking at an AI as a very nice helper and helps you get to like the 90% position, and then you complete the like the last mile or something like that.
Yeah, I think the key thing is to measure the insights from the attribution and its suggested recommendations,
Hmm.
and have a feedback loop that is monitored through a human being, right? So if you think about, imagine a control center where you're monitoring the results and the outputs of the AI,
Hmm.
right? And you're saying, is this going in the right direction? Because it's going to be very tough, or I think it's going to be take some time for you to become completely autonomous,
Hmm.
right? And maybe that happens, maybe that does not happen, right? I think it probably not happen completely self-autonomous. How do you kind of orchestrate a full GTM funnel autonomously, especially between different teams, etc.? The key mindset to have is, imagine a control center where you're monitoring the outputs and the outcomes of the AI and the recommendations, and there's a feedback loop, so you can kind of intervene into that AI,
Hmm.
right? And intervene in those recommendations, right? And kind of create a time frame of intervention as
Hmm.
well, right? Because let's say you want to do lead prioritization, account prioritization, create audience lists, create content, automatically send personalized messages, right? You want to be able to monitor the quality of that, of what's happening. So you will
Correct.
need to
Hmm.
create almost a GTM control center to be able to monitor what's happening, right? Especially the outputs of the AI, right? So that it doesn't hallucinate, and you can kind of protect yourself from that.
Nice, nice. That's I think a very good way to look at it, so that you don't like over rely and lose dollars, like
Yeah,
they would say.
absolutely.
All right. So great, great. I think this has been very, very insightful, Didi. And moving on to the lightning round, right? So I've already asked you too many questions, but three more.
Okay.
And these are not related to the topic at all. So let's get started with the first one, right? So
Okay.
what's the one fun fact about you, Didi, that people wouldn't guess from your LinkedIn profile?
I play pickleball really well.
Oh, nice.
I
I
play.
think that sport has been catching up really fast in India.
Yeah, yeah. I played it at a conference, and I kind of beat some of my team members. So
Oh, wow.
tell me, I played really well. So
Nice. Definitely something, we couldn't guess from
yeah,
your LinkedIn.
yeah.
Nice. So on to the second one, right? So if you could magically solve one challenge in B2B SaaS in India particularly, so what would it be?
How do you optimize cross-border GTM
Hmm.
sitting out of India? Right. It takes a
Yeah.
while to kind of figure that out.
Hmm.
I think there could be playbooks. I think playbooks are there, but you don't realize the difficulty of it
Hmm.
until you do it and immerse yourself in it. Right. But if
Yeah.
you solve that problem, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you go to like there's so many playbooks, and on this like podcast itself, I've hosted so many people to talk only about this particular topic.
Yeah.
Right. Even then, and there are so many other like companies and firms out there who's putting like so much of content on this topic. Even then, like it just baffles me like that founders and all the operators also like face the same challenge of solving the cross-border GTM, like India to US GTM. It's just surprising. And I think even after all this data being available, the answer, like the first answer that you would hear from any consultant or any fractional CM or anybody you hire would be like, hey, it depends, right? Like it depends on
Yeah. Yeah.
a
I
lot of
agree.
other
It really
stuff.
depends. But I think the couple of things I've learned is, be open to having US based teams
Hmm.
earlier than what one does normally.
Hmm.
Be open to, if it's a very domain based product, be open to having those team members be off the shoes of your customers,
Hmm.
right? So if you're selling to marketing teams, have your front facing team have a marketer, right? Or if you're
Yeah.
selling to sales teams, have your front facing team have a sales persona, because building that credibility happens faster. Again, it depends on the kind of product you're selling, etc. So those two principles are important. That's what I've learned. That's made an impact to us. Yeah.
Nice, awesome. So and the third and the last one, right? So what's like one of the biggest misconception people have about like your role particular to like being a CEO or a founder and this industry altogether?
A misconception about the role and being a founder in a B2B SaaS company?
Yeah.
That it's all fun being a CEO, right? Or being a founder, right? Well, it's fun, but there's a lot more to it, right? That's number one. I think that's maybe the biggest consumption outside in. Yeah.
Nice. I think, but I think people know somewhere it's definitely not fun, but they still want to get onto the other side. And I think that's where, like in the next or in this decade, like India will see like a lot of SaaS entrepreneur.
Yeah. The other misconception that might happen sometimes is that as a founder and CEO, you're always responding to the market, and the market is a very brutal place, right? The market is highly objective and absolutely brutal,
right?
So, and the founder or the CEO is usually the person who's taking the brunt of that brutal feedback from the market, right? And so then he or she has to drive to say that, how do I win in this market? And so you have to kind of drive speed in your teams, not for the sake of driving speed, but for the sake of winning in the market.
Totally.
Sometimes the misconception becomes, hey, the founder is just working hard, just because he likes to make other people work hard. It's not that, because you have to kind of win in a brutal market. You have to kind of work at the speed of the market rather than be behind it. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I think that's a very, very good insight for people who are trying to get into this, right? Great. Awesome. So again, thanks a lot, Didi, for taking time and sharing all these insights with us. I think it would be tremendously helpful for anybody who's trying to get into attribution and see like how can AI help in all of this and how they should look at AI in attribution in essence.
Great. Thank you. It was wonderful. Thanks for having me, Sundal. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.